So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Inspector General of Water Compliance, Mr. Troy Grant.
Good morning, everybody. It's terrific to be with you all again. Yuandu, Troy Grant, Inspector General, Water Compliance. Nadu Banigu Gubara, Radri Mayangalang. Nurumga Nina Gira, Durinya Gaida. I've just acknowledged the traditional owners of this part of the basin, the Wiradjuri people in Northern Wiradjuri language. In doing so, I paid my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I also acknowledge any Indigenous and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. It was in May of last year when I stood at the last MDBA conference in Wentworth, where I got the opportunity to outline my intent and commitment pending the establishment of the statutory Inspector General of Water Compliance role in the Federal Parliament. At the time, I was the Interim Inspector General, and my intent was ambitious. Since then, a little over 12 months, I've continued to travel the length and breadth of the basin, listening to communities, various groups, stakeholders, hearing their concerns. And consequently, my ambition remains ambitious. I've continued to learn a lot, and I've continued to learn that trust and confidence in how water is managed remains low. I've learned there's a distrust of government and bureaucracy, and that continues. And that our communities don't think their most precious resource is being taken care of properly. I've learnt that people who live and work in the basin states don't actually know much about the role of the Inspector General of Water Compliance and what I do. And furthermore, that the foundational knowledge of how water is managed and regulated both within and outside the basin is particularly poor, something that was rammed home to me yesterday at the Henty Field Days. So I want to clear some of that up. I'm going to tell you exactly what my office was established to do, but equally as important is what we don't do, and more critically than that, what we've done since I last spoke to you at the MDBA conference. So what were we established to do? And that was to regulate the regulators, oversight those charged with water management in the basin, and inquire into the critical issues to build trust and confidence in the basin plan. What my office isn't here to do is to enforce rules on individual water users, unless as a last resort measure. That is the job of the state regulators, and we don't have the resources or any interest in duplicating that role. But the community continue to express to me and my office they aren't happy with their state water managers. So my role is to ensure that water managers are being held to account and are doing the right thing, according to the basin plan, and most importantly, according to the law. The role of the Inspector General isn't to duplicate, as I said, the role of states as the frontline regulators. Rather, the Inspector General will oversee state compliance and ensure effective water management is undertaken. We have significant oversight powers over the Commonwealth agencies as well, making sure they are delivering on their obligations to the plan and other water-related legislation. And there's a number of upcoming projects that we will be focusing to make sure this performance is where it should be. So while my powers are extensive, they are not all-encompassing, and there are areas for which I am not responsible for. So in short, as Inspector General of Water Compliance, I have the ability to use both oversight and compliance powers. Importantly, my role is independent and reports into the Australian Senate. The Inspector General of Water Compliance is not a government department and does not create policy. But what powers do we have, if not policy creation? Legislation has been passed which includes new penalties for water theft and illegal trading of water. This legislation gives my office the power to act to ensure compliance and enforcement of water rules. We can also look into areas of concern where trends and community sentiment indicate there's a problem over there. We need someone to look into it. Someone needs to be looking. We act based on evidence and provide a balanced voice for communities. That's why my ties to the communities is at the heart of how we've structured our office, through my field officers who are located alongside many staff actually in the basin. And how has my office been providing a balanced voice for the communities? So on Monday, I'm releasing a review of River Murray operations and environmental water management. It's called the Steady As She Flows report. Today, you get to hear first what the report found. So after my address at last year's MDBA conference in Wentworth, I listened to what you told me. I heard what you had to say. And it became very clear to me that there was a lack of trust in how the Murray-Darling Basin Authority was managing the River Murray, as well as how the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder was using its environmental water holdings. So from there, our job was to sort fact from fiction. The MDBA and the TUO are two key Australian government agencies responsible for water management in the Murray-Darling Basin. Community engagement, in addition to what I heard from you, indicated there was an emerging concern about how the system was being managed by these bodies. I heard it through the work of our field officers as well, who are on the ground speaking to communities, and I heard it directly. So as part of my oversight abilities under law, I made a commitment to look into these concerns. And in particular, we dug deep and we assessed whether each agency was relying on sound information to support their operations and decision-making processes. And I found, and I report to you, that these agencies are performing their functions according to the Water Act and the Basin Plan. As a result, this report, I'm confident, will be hard to swallow for many in the communities who told me emphatically these government agencies weren't running the rivers or environmental flows properly. I've listened, then I've acted, and now, as I'm obliged to do, I'm reporting back to the community on those findings. So I want to build trust and confidence, but I can't do that without being honest. And I can honestly say this report found that the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder and the Murray-Darling Basin Authority are performing professionally and in accordance with their obligations. As the Inspector General, I can assure you, based on the evidence before me, that is the finding. So the IGWC examined internal operational documents, the tools being used and the processes being undertaken. We conducted targeted interviews with the MDBA, the TUO and other state stakeholders, industry stakeholders, and all those directly involved and impacted in their operations. This report is independent, it is thorough, and it looks at all the information that is available. So my role as the Inspector General of Water Compliance is to provide this independent oversight, to ask the critical questions about how government agencies are performing in their roles, to gather and assess the data and evidence before me, and to get to the bottom of issues. One of the primary issues is the frustration that the community have about water for the environment versus water for irrigation. There is room in the system for both, but increasing environmental pressures like climate change and more frequent droughts puts additional pressure on the system which is obvious to us all. This, rightly so, leaves the community wary, sceptical and cynical about how decisions are being made to prioritise water releases. When water availability is tight, concerns about mismanagement or poor systems come to the fore. They're as sensitive as they get. So people are looking at that time for a cause or someone to blame for these issues. And that's quite a normal and natural human instinct. In fact, the former Inspector General, Mick Kelty, pointed out in one of his original reports that the community was of the belief that the river operators faced little to no accountability for minimising losses, and that there is no transparency in how they manage the river. So I've investigated this claim, and while I did not find any specific wrongdoing, I did find plenty of opportunities to respond to those community concerns. And these opportunities relate to communication and information provision, which quite frankly in the last decade hasn't been good enough. As challenging as it is for both agencies, and it is tough, it's complex, it's very challenging, and that's acknowledged, there are areas obviously open for better improvement. So any of these communication information provision failures don't disproportionately demolish public confidence. We all know that water management is an extremely complex area. This report in the River Murray operations has highlighted that clearly. It also highlighted what is a greater problem: the siloed, individual approach to water in this country. The Murray-Darling Basin Agreement has been around since 1912, long before the plan. That's 110 years. 110 years this country has been trying to work together on water management, and it still today remains a highly contested space. The River Murray system, an integral and vital part of the basin, is operated according to this agreement, this 110-year-old agreement, which sets out how water in the River Murray system is shared between Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia. However, it does not incorporate the management of water for the environment, which was only formally recognised with the introduction of the Commonwealth Water Act and the Basin Plan. So there is where the inherent conflict lies. That's at the heart of what's driving the issues, the concerns and the sentiment from the community. This conflict is exemplified in this process by the clear lack of a clear, transparent process for prioritising needs where there are competing demands for water delivery. With increasing demands on the system, the agreement does not provide river operators, and it's not their fault, with an agreed process to prioritise which water user gets their water in the event of a shortfall scenario occurring. This is a rare event, but it may occur, and it's what drives that community fear. It's a design flaw, but it's difficult to say what should be given priority. Should it be irrigation to provide food for the nation and our trade obligations? Or should it be for the environment? Because without a healthy river ecosystem, as we all know, there is no water. So this is not a new issue, and it's not one that's not understood by everyone in this room. But with this, there's a risk, having previously been identified by the Independent River Operations Review Group. And I note and acknowledge that work is underway with an independent panel set up to report to the Basin Officials Committee on options for managing delivery challenges in the River Murray. This work must be given priority, and it must come with outcomes. But as I said last year in my speech, we're a problem-solving office. We aren't here to write reports about what the problems are or how they came to be, but it's important to understand the history and context of the complex arrangements our office, the water agencies and the community have to navigate. But our focus is firmly fixed on the future, which is why I have identified opportunities for improvement and provided them to the two agencies. Firstly, I'm pleased to note that in December 2020, the Australian and New South Wales governments announced the location of 20 new and upgraded gauging stations across the Northern Basin, which includes the Darling, the Macquarie, Colgoa, the Gwydir, Border Rivers and Nemoy catchments in New South Wales. And we all know the phrase, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. That's very true with water. Any additional gauging points in the Northern Basin are likely to increase transparency by helping to understand the increasingly variable flows and their flow-on effects. And I'm not singling out the Northern Basin as part of this story, because it goes to a heart of what is potentially a bigger issue, and it was referred to earlier by Andrew. There is far too often an us and them mentality and narrative regarding the northern and southern basins. But I want to hasten to point out that there is no actual defining line or border or actual legislative definition between north and south. It is one basin. This terminology has been perpetuated by communities who are looking to pass blame and point the finger, north to south, south to north, particularly during times of drought and low flows and high pressure. And this paradigm has been the single biggest reason for the erosion of trust and confidence in the basin. But back to the gauging stations. So by increasing gauging points anywhere in the system, it provides an added layer of transparency to know how the river is running. Benefits may also come for additional gauging points in the Southern Basin, particularly on the tributaries that flow into the River Murray system, as well as an increase in the availability of telemetered measurement data. Having this real-time data for river operators will allow for a more efficient operation and decision-making processes on the River Murray system. Secondly, the absence of agreed data standards adds another unnecessary layer of complexity and inconsistency to the data that is currently collected by states and provided into the MDBA for managing the river system. 3 partners with the MDBA, 3 sets of data, 3 sets of figures, all inconsistent. Poor Andrew Reynolds. Inconsistent data can be confusing and can make the job of the river operators more difficult. My observation is that a data standard would ease the pressure on river operators. As part of my legislative remit, I have the power to create standards. To add to the confusion, each basin government holds vital information about their own water rules, entitlements, allocations and environmental water. However, the Bureau of Meteorology, with its water information portal, is making great strides in consolidating important and varied streams of water information. And I encourage Matt Coulton and his team to keep up the great work in this exercise. It is critical work. Having this one-stop shop for resources is welcomed, because my report found that there are still over 20 organisations and websites all providing different information about the Murray-Darling Basin. No wonder people lose confidence and don't know where to look or access the information that is important to them. And I know that many will be sitting here wondering why a report into the River Murray operations and the TUO was even necessary given my findings. Well, it's because it was overwhelmingly asked for. And for sometimes we need to spend time and resources on things to provide a level of assurance to the community. especially when the community tells me things aren't working. If something is even perceived as an issue and I notice a trend, I will look into it. And if I don't find anything wrong, I'll tell you, because then you know I've looked at it and I'm independent, and hopefully you will trust what we've found. The Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder has been the subject of multiple published inquiries and reviews since 2013. This automatically tells me there is a public perception that this organisation is not trusted. Yet, the information from this review clearly indicates the opposite. The TUO is working with new objectives around an old river system with management arrangements that suited the river's use more than 100 years ago. It has a culture of continuous improvement that was very evident to us. It has a willingness to learn and change as required, which are foundations for long-term success. So my review found that the TUO is open to feedback and current work to develop a corporate plan and is seen as an important initiative to guide clear strategic intent and address the issues I've raised. Their investment in the local engagement offices, the LEO network as it's known, has also been beneficial, and it's there to ensure there is robust community engagement. The LEO network is something that the TUO does well, and I'd like to see it expanded. It's important to acknowledge that the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holders has its successes, and it also has its failures. And they again go back to communication and information provision. So I've passed my report, as I said earlier, to the relevant agencies, and I'm confident, given their cooperation during the review, that they will take these recommendations seriously to provide transparency and accountability that is missing currently in the Murray-Darling Basin water landscape. Our office has been very busy in the last 12 months, and since I was last here, we've also released an audit into Goulburn Murray Water's disclosure obligations under the Basin Plan. We've released the annual Sustainable Diversion Limit Statement of Compliance, and we're about to release another audit in the coming weeks in relation to the Border Rivers trade arrangements. That report will be titled Not Happy. This work is laying the foundations for longer-term objectives. We need to remember that nationwide reform takes time. The Steady As It Flow reports also follows another important body of work the office undertook in the Des Pearson Review, which looked at compliance and enforcement across the Murray-Darling Basin. I engaged the services of the eminent former Auditor-General of Western Australia and Victoria, Mr Des Pearson, to undertake this review. He found something not too different to what the River Operations Report uncovered. He found there needs to be better consistency and collaboration among basin governments. His review found there needs to be more consistency of enforcement. But he did not find a smoking gun when looking at how each basin state manages illegal water management activities. My office has started a podcast called Water's Edge, which is trending at number 20 already in Commonwealth podcasts. So, as Molly Meldrum would say, it's with a bullet on its way. And that podcast, latest episode, has Des Pearson on there explaining what and how he came to some of his conclusions, and I think it's well worth a listen. He broke down the complexities of all those reports and investigations in easy-to-understand layman's terms. Des said in his decades in auditing and the public service, he has never seen so many different terminologies and inconsistencies. It's unique to the water space. For example, New South Wales refers to floodplain harvesting, and for the same activity in Queensland, it's overland flow. This varied view of water management is not only just confusing, It's no wonder the community lacks trust and confidence in how government is managing the system when we can't even agree on terminology. So we must start to view water in the basin as an asset of the Australian people, not something that is owned by the states. Again, I refer to what I said more than 12 months ago at the last MDBA conference. It's our job to compel the basin states to do better, and trust me, we will. That's why I've outlined 5 key actions in the Des Pearson report that I think will help address this siloed, segmented approach to water enforcement. The first action was to establish a Regulatory Leaders Forum, a quarterly meeting which provides regulatory leaders from each basin state the opportunity to share ideas. We have them at the table working collectively together, and we've already had 3 of those meetings and we are already making progress. We commenced in October 21 and they've proven to be beneficial. This is the first time they've been compelled or strongly encouraged to work collaboratively, share better practice and discuss certain issues. The second action item aims to improve the quality and consistency of water compliance performance reporting. It's what you get to see on how they're travelling and how they're measuring up. And this is about transparency and improvement of public trust. My aim is to have this finalised by the end of this year so that reporting against the framework can commence in 23 for everyone to see. Having a basin-wide metering standard is the third action item and will be led by my office. Under the Water Act, the Inspector-General has the ability, as I said earlier, to issue standards relating to measuring water taken in the basin. It will allow for a consistent standard for metering in the basin, addressing a common community concern that water take is not being measured consistently or accurately. The fourth action item is to review the water take that is accounted for using estimates or models as opposed to actually being measured. A key feature of water resource plans, which everyone knows my view on, is for basin states to outline how they will determine how much water is taken each year, which is why the absence of accredited WRPs in New South Wales is such a critical issue. But I am comforted to learn of the progress that's been made since my speech in June. And this leads me to the final action item, which is determining the harm caused by unauthorised take. My office will develop a guideline for establishing the harm caused by unauthorised take from basin water resources. This is key in determining what enforcement action should be taken when water theft has occurred. Something the community has told me is that they think the fines and punishment for unauthorised water take should be fair and in comparison to the seriousness of the crime. This final action item will create a consistent baseline to quantify the actual harm caused by unauthorised water take. And this will take a number of factors into account, such as commercial cost, environmental harm, loss of water for First Nations people. And I intend to have this work completed by the end of 2024. So to finish up, the findings of Des Pearson's review and the Steady As She Flows reports are examples of how the federated model is failing in the water space. Yes, the purpose of federation was to bring the states and territories together. It ended the challenges having different taxation, currency laws, transportation issues that we were facing in 1901. But it has not changed how water is managed in all that time. So more than 121 years after federation, we still don't have it right. While my office has hit the ground running, it will take a lot of work to get things performing better. And as I said, these reforms cannot be rushed. If we rush it, we'll get it wrong. That's why I'm relying on the community to bring their concerns to me. I want you to liaise with our field officers, tell them what you're worried about, and we'll find out the truth of the matter. I don't want the findings of the River Operations Report to deter anyone from bringing your concerns forward. I need a starting point, and from there, we will investigate it, and if there's a growing trend, we'll inquire into it. You may not like what I find, you may not think I've looked in the right place, but but we need the information to get things underway. We're an evidence-based agency. We believe in transparency and accountability, and I make no apology for calling out any bad behaviour, as I've done in the past. But I think it's also important to recognise when things are being done lawfully and properly, and importantly, debunking any myths that are eroding public trust and confidence. In this instance, the Des Pearson Review and River Operations and Environmental Watering Report have not found any evidence of outright maladministration. They've found areas for improvement, and these improvements, I'm confident, will be adopted. It comes back to the lens I was talking about earlier. I call on the basin states to look at the Murray-Darling Basin Plan and other water laws with a wider lens and not be so focused on what's going on only in their own patch. The Federal Minister has clearly stated a key mantra to identify and find solutions to the challenges in the basin that the basin faces. Community and collaboration are key to advancing this country and water management, and she couldn't be more right. It's been terrific to see you all again. Thanks for your time. I wish you all well.